Good evening, and thank you for joining us for the post-Apple and El Dorado Burn Scar Community Meeting. First thing, I want to introduce myself, Shane Reichart. I'm the Senior Public Information Specialist for the County of Riverside's Emergency Management Department. And I want to make sure that people understand that this meeting is intended for Riverside County residents. So if you're in some of the other areas affected by some of these burn scars, your local jurisdiction should have additional information that will be specific for your area. So San Bernardino County should be contacting San Bernardino County residents and providing information for San Bernardino County residents. With that, I'd like to introduce Supervisor for the 5th District, Jeff Hewitt.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. Even before the Apple and El Dorado fires were put out, my staff, flood, EMD, Transportation Department, and many others have been tirelessly working to prepare our community for the impending flood events the fall and winter will certainly bring. Those that live in Cherry Valley, Beaumont, and Banning need to be vigilant and learn where the evacuation zones are. How you can connect with the county to know when your evacuation zones are activated is so important. What to do if you are asked to evacuate. Number one, you're going to hear a lot of information tonight. Please listen carefully and take it seriously. Number two, we've brought in the best local, state, and federal experts available to help us to understand what to expect this winter. The bear and work reports give us incredible insights to impacts. Number three, the experts are telling us that if it rains, these burn canyons can produce potentially dangerous situations for our communities. Number four, if evacuations are called, please heed them. Number five, please take the warnings seriously and please be prepared. Our county flood department is award-winning and known all over the world for their skills and hard work. I have the utmost confidence in their abilities. It is my honor tonight to introduce Jason Newley, the Director of Riverside County Flood. He will fill you in on all the details. I cannot express how important it is that you listen, take notes, and deeply grasp the information he will provide. And when he comes up in a moment, in plain speak, people, a lot of the sides of our mountains have burned, and they've left it so that there's nothing to stop the impending rain gathering force and come down and potentially bring lots of debris flows into our neighborhoods. We've seen what's happened in the past in Montecito after a large fire a few years ago. The damage was much greater from the flooding than the fire itself. Heed these warnings and take them seriously. You're going to hear everything you need to know tonight, but get in the position so when it does happen, if you're in that area, not only heed them yourselves, but let your neighbors know also, so that we can have the fewest real harm, especially to lives, because everything else can be replaced. Remember that. So with that, I'll turn that over to the head of our flood department, Jason Newley. Jason, come on up.
Thank you very much, Supervisor Hewitt, and I also want to thank you for your tremendous support and the support of your staff. The support that we've received has helped us to open the doors that we need to have open to help us prepare our communities this winter. And so my name is Jason Newley. I'm the General Manager of the Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District. I've been with the district for 25 years, and me and my team were the team that helped to lead us through the Holy Fire this last winter in 2018 and 2019. And so what I'd like to do now is go to our slide presentation, if we may. Okay. So as Supervisor Hewitt noted, the El Dorado fire and the Holy Fire are entirely capable of producing dangerous flash floods, mud flows, and debris flows out of many of the canyons that have been burned. And when these flash floods and mud flows and debris flows happen, they happen very quickly. You cannot outrun them. You can't outdrive them in your car. The only thing you can do is not be there when they get there. And so that is why we spend an incredible amount of time developing science to understand how these mud flows and debris flows are going to move through the community, and also developing evacuation zones that allow us to really focus on the areas that we need to get people out of. And so if we call an evacuation, please, please evacuate, because we're really trying to protect you and your family's health and safety. And so actually this, mine's the one that starts with it's got the slides with the burn area on it. Just give me 1 second here to get the technology up and running. It's the one that's got the picture of the mountain. Yes. Okay. So this is just a picture of the burn area. We've had over 50,000 acres burned by the Apple Fire and the El Dorado Fire. Today, I'm not going to be covering all these canyons. I'm really going to be focusing on these 5 canyons that we are highlighting in color here. So Myers, Smith, Marshall, Noble, and Little San Gorgonio. These are the canyons that are going to affect the unincorporated Cherry Valley community, Myers Canyon, as well as the cities of Beaumont and Banning. What I'm going to say today is very specific to these canyons. It will not address any of the canyons in San Bernardino County or any of the canyons tributary to the Morongo Reservation. If you're a resident in one of those areas, please speak with the Morongo Fire Department or speak to San Bernardino County Flood Control or San Bernardino County, and they can get you information that's specific to the risks from the canyons where you live. And so today what I'm going to cover is what to expect this winter, what you might see coming out of these canyons. I'm also going to summarize some of the draft reports that have come out that highlight what the experts have found as they've analyzed the canyons that have been burned. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what you can do as a resident to help protect yourself and your property. And so when we have a burn like this, especially a hot burn like the El Dorado Fire and the Apple Fire, what ends up happening is the chemistry of the soils change. Under a normal rainstorm, what will happen is rain can infiltrate into the mountain. A lot of the rain will infiltrate into the mountain, and some of the rain runs off. After we have a burn like this, the mountain can't absorb water, and all of the rain comes off the mountain, comes out of the canyons, and into the community. And so that's why when we have burns like this, the next winter, small storms feel like big storms. And when that water comes out of the canyon, it's not just the water. You're also going to be bringing down with it the ash, the burnt vegetation, the soils and the sediment in the bottom of the canyons. And in the steeper parts of the canyons, it'll even be bringing down big rock. And so all of this can be coming out of the canyons and into the community under certain scenarios. And when we have these debris flows and these mud flows and these flood flows coming out of the canyons, they can do things like knock telephone poles over, they can hit utilities that might be attached to bridges and knock out water lines and other forms of utilities. And so even when the fire is over, even when the rainstorm is over, there are still remnant impacts like mud on the roads that prevent you from driving around the community, and potentially a loss of utilities that prevent you from having electricity or water or maybe even telephone service. Actually, what I would do right now is we put together a video of some segments from the Holy Fire. And so we want to show this video real quick because this is a video that'll show what a half an inch in an hour rainstorm looks like after a burn. And so if we can get that video up and running. And as you're watching this video, we think that
some intense moments for homeowners out here as this mud flow from the Holy Fire burn scar shot straight out of this drainage ditch and across the street toward their homes. Black muddy water shooting about 15 or 20 feet in the air in Lake Elsinore. The Holy Fire debris flow burst out of the wash that runs behind dozens of homes on Brookstone Lane.
This is video that we shot of the channel behind Dale Court. This around 2:30 this afternoon, the strongest debris flow we've seen in that channel yet. And from that very strong storm cell that moved through the area between about 1:30 and 2:30. Shot by Phil Register, one of the residents there. You can see just in an incredible amount of mud, even bringing down trash cans, rocks, boulders down the street. Now.
That's the actual burn area right there. And you can see how it made its way down. Yes, there is another little road out there, a very residential road. That's going to be Bosley Lane, also closed right now. It's residential, but you can see that road washed out. And you also can just tell by the darkness of the water. It's all ash from the recent burn area. The 15 in the shot, 15 not affected by what's going on.
Okay. If we go back to the PowerPoint now, I was just told that we were having some audio issues, and the audio up until the point that video played may not have been working. And so I'm just going to summarize really quickly what I was saying before that, which was basically this was a clip of a rain event, a half inch and 1 hour rain event in the Holy Fire after the Holy Fire burn. These were clips from November and December. The reason I'm showing these clips is I think they're representative of what we will see coming out of the canyons in the Apple and El Dorado fire, particularly those canyons that I was talking about earlier, which are Maya's Canyon, Marshall Creek, Smith Creek, Noble Creek, and the Little San Gorgonio Creek. And so this is representative, if we get intense rainfall this winter, of the types of things we might see. Now, what I want to hit on as you were watching those videos, probably what you saw was a lot of water, you saw a lot of mud, you saw a lot of vegetation. What you didn't see was a lot of rock. And that's normally when people think about debris flows, they think about big rocks coming out of canyons like happened in Montecito and destroying homes and destroying properties. If there's some good news about the Apple and El Dorado fire, it's that although they do expect that debris flows will be initiated, they expect that the big rock is going to be held up in the deep canyons and it's not going to make it out to the community. What they do expect to come out into the community is the water, is the mud, and is the vegetation. And so those are the risks that we're going to be trying to manage this winter. And so on this slide, what we're not expecting in these canyons is something that looks like Montecito. What we're looking is that this winter is something that probably is going to look much more like what we saw in the Holy Fire after the Holy Fire burn. Also want to point out that it's not any kind of rainfall that produces mud flows and debris flows. If we were to get spring showers all winter long, that would be wonderful because it would help the mountain heal. It takes intense rainfall, like a light thunderstorm or stronger, to actually cause these canyons to activate. So if we get a half inch an hour of rain or more in terms of intensity, that's when we would start to think that we're going to get mud flows coming out of these canyons. I also want to point out that we can run into situations where it's raining hard on the mountain and it's not raining at all where you're at. You can still get a mud flow out of the mountains and into the community if it's not raining in the community. All it matters is how hard it's raining up in those mountains. And then lastly, I want to point out that it typically takes 3 to 5 years for the vegetation to recover and the mountain to heal. So each year, the impacts from the fire will be less and less and less. But we will be feeling this for at least 2 to 3 years after the burn. Now, what you saw in that video, especially out of some of those larger canyons in the Holy Fire, was an incredible amount of vegetation. And what typically happens when that vegetation comes out of the mountain and into the community is it plugs culverts. It plugs culverts under the roads. It even will plug big bridges like this. And once that bridge gets plugged, once that culvert under the road gets plugged, the water, the vegetation, the mud, it has nowhere to go but up and out of the channel and into the community. When that water starts moving through the community, it's going to be moving in ways that it hasn't moved before because normally it's in a channel. And so this winter, there will be a lot of people who may be at risk of having their homes flooded, having water moving around their house and mud moving around the house where they normally wouldn't, simply because these channels have a propensity to plug, and then once they plug, the water starts getting up on the land and moving across the land. And so this is just a picture from the canyon fire in Corona, where there was a mud flow that ended up impacting 5 or 6 houses in a tract neighborhood that normally wouldn't have expected any risk at all. And so now what I want to do is talk a little bit about the studies that have been done to date. We have worked very hard to get the best experts in the nation and in the state working on this fire. We've had the Bear team down from the U.S. Forest Service looking at these canyons. There's some of the best experts in the nation at looking at burn scars from the federal perspective. We've also had the best experts in the state from CAL FIRE and from CGS down here to help us understand the risks to our communities. And what these experts have been doing is they've been going up and down these canyons looking for problem areas. And so they start marking where they see problem areas, and then they'll send us a map. And if you look at this slide, what you'll see is there's a bunch of red dots and little red shapes. Those red dots and those red shapes are areas where the CAL FIRE work team identified a risk to property, a risk to life, or a risk to infrastructure. They give that information to us so that we at the local level can do additional analysis. And so once we have this information, we take that and add to it information we have about historic flooding, about known floodplains, about doing additional analysis to look at, well, what happens if this bridge plugs? What happens if the bridge at Orchard plugs? What happens if the bridge at Beaumont Avenue plugs? What happens if the bridge at Oak Valley plugs? We look at all of these different scenarios so that we can develop evacuation zones. And so what you're now seeing on your screen is a map of the evacuation zones, which are these blue shapes. And so there's a lot of science and study that goes into developing these evacuation zones. The other thing you'll notice is there's a lot of evacuation zones. And the reason for that is it gives us the flexibility to only evacuate the areas that need to evacuate. If we have a small zone, we might only evacuate a couple areas. If we have a small storm, we might only evacuate a couple areas. If we have a large storm, we might need to evacuate more. And so please know that we're really focused on trying to get the right people out of areas of harm. And so when we call these evacuations, please heed them, because there's a lot of work that went into trying to assess where these risks are. So what I want to do now is just walk through the canyons. I'm going to start with Myers Canyon and work my way west. When the experts from the state went through and looked at Myers Canyon, what they basically saw is that about half the properties in Myers Canyon are going to have problems this winter if it rains hard. The other thing they noticed is that Myers Canyon Road, it runs right adjacent to Myers Canyon Creek, and that they expect that they're going to have flood flows up on the roads, there's going to be mud up on the roads, the road is going to be very dangerous, potentially washed out. And maybe even most importantly is that to get in and out of Myers Canyon, you have to cross the San Gorgonio River. And the San Gorgonio River will be capable of producing very dangerous flash floods this winter because so much of the Banning Canyon has burned. And so because of the risks, the numerous risks in Myers Canyon, it's very likely that it will be evacuated if we are expecting intense rainfall this winter, because it's going to be very dangerous, and also because it's very likely that you could get trapped back up there because of the impacts to the roads. Next, I want to talk about Smith Creek. Smith Creek's a 2 square mile canyon that comes off the bench. Typically, flows come out of Smith Creek through a confined canyon heading toward the Highland Springs Resort. At the top of the resort, they take a 90-degree turn and head south, and they kind of run parallel to the east side of the resort into the golf course. Unfortunately, with the amount of mud and vegetation and flood flows we're expecting this winter, we believe that there's a chance that the water is not going to want to make that 90-degree turn, and it's going to come up out of the bank and impact portions of the resort and portions of the golf course. Moving on to Marshall Creek. Marshall Creek is actually one of the smallest canyons that we're watching. It's a 400-acre canyon. Marshall Creek was actually burned in 2016 by the Bogart Fire. We also had a mud flow on Marshall Creek in 2016 in December. And so our team actually went out after that mud flow and documented it so that we would have that information if we ever had another fire and another risk. And so we have documented where that mud flow went, and we shared it with the experts, and the experts said, yeah, if you have another mud flow out of the canyon, it's probably going to look a lot like that one that you saw last time. And so you can see some pictures. This is after they cleared the road, but you can see the driveways, approaches have mud in them. There's mud that came across Brookstone and kind of spread out onto the field there. And so you have a sense of what might happen out of Marshall Creek just from the Bogart Fire. The other thing that happened in this canyon in 2019 was a Valentine's Day storm. That was a very extreme storm, and it put water not only down Bellflower, where water usually tends to go out of Marshall Canyon, but it sent water across the community kind of southwest from the top of Bellflower. And so between those two events, between the debris flow or the mud flow that happened in 2016 and the Valentine's Day storm from 2019, I think the residents in this area probably have a sense of what to expect. And if you had problems with your property in either of those storms, Valentine's Day or the December 2016 storm, it's very likely that you might have problems again this winter and that you will need to make sure that you're prepared. However, I would also point, as you look at this map, that if you look at the areas marked Marshall D and Marshall C, that there's some blue shading there. And that blue shading represents a floodplain. And what the floodplain tells us is that all of that area that's in blue is at some risk of flooding in a strong storm in the winter. And so even if your property wasn't directly affected by those two events, if you live in that shaded area, or even really within the blue outline of Marshall D or Marshall C, you're probably at particularly risk of having issues this winter. Lastly, I want to talk about Little San Gorgonio and Noble Creek. Little San Gorgonio was burned by the El Dorado fire. There's about 5 square miles of burned canyon just in Little San Gorgonio. There's 4 square miles of burned canyon in Noble Creek. So these are big canyons that burned very badly. The good news is that we do have flood control channels that pick up flow from these canyons. The challenging news is that these flood control channels were built in the 50s, and they are not designed or sized to handle the type of flows that we could get if we have a significant storm this winter from these canyons. And so we do expect that there's a very real chance that floodwaters could come up out of these channels, particularly at the bridge at Orchard as well as the bridge at Beaumont, and that once that water comes up, it'll try to move through the community. Now, if you look on this exhibit, you may see that there is this blue shaded area. That's a mapped floodplain, and so this is an area of known flood risk, and this winter, that area of known flood risk is going to be particularly active. And so when we were looking at setting up our evacuation zones, you'll note that these zones in red are the zones that we expect are going to be at the highest risk of having issues this winter. Now, you'll see that there are other zones that are marked. If we have stronger storms, some of these other zones may have issues too, but the zones in red are the ones that we're expecting are going to have the most challenges this winter, and that includes the homes that are located between Noble Creek and Little San Gorgonio south of Orchard, as well as the 2 trailer parks that are located off of Brookside and the properties in between, as well as the high school and the middle school off of Cougar Road. And so I do want to point out that our flood control district is doing everything we can to try to keep water in the channel. We're actively working on multiple projects. We're cleaning out the channels and expanding their capacity. This is some work we're doing under Oak Valley Bridge. We're also doing work. We're going to start a project on the Beaumont Bridge here in a few weeks, and the goal of that project is to improve the bridge so that that bridge is going to be less likely to plug during winter storms this season. We're doing work up above. I want to thank the Beaumont Cherry Valley Water District because they've been an incredible partner with us. They're allowing us to use their land to basically pound metal stakes into the ground that'll help us to capture vegetation and mud up above the community so that we can try and keep, at least for the small storms, keep that mud and vegetation out of the community on Noble Creek. And they're similarly partnering with us on the Little San Gorgonio recharge basins to modify those basins so that they can have a similar function to try to catch mud and vegetation before it gets into our channels and into the community so that we can be safer this winter. And lastly, I want to point out that Beaumont Cherry Valley has also been really helpful in that they've sent crews up into lands they own further up the canyon to basically remove trees that were cut down by the fire department when they were cutting fire roads. And so they're taking those trees and moving them to high ground so they don't get mobilized by storm flows. And so we're going to be doing everything we can this winter to keep those channels functioning and keep water in those channels. But there is a risk that they will get overwhelmed, and there is a real risk that we're going to need to call evacuations in this area. So lastly, I want to talk about private property mitigation, which you can do to help yourself. Before the storm, you're going to want to really make sure you're taking a good look at your property. If you've got dead or dying trees, you're going to want to make sure you get in and trim those back so they don't fall over and damage your yard. You're also going to want to make sure weep holes on your fences and if you have retaining walls are all clear so that they function. And you're going to want to make sure that any drainage pathways on your property are clear so that water can efficiently flow through them. If you're in an area where you're really worried about water moving through your property or water and mud moving through your property, work with your neighbor to create flow-through areas. The most important thing you can do is protect your home. If you create flow-through areas through your lot, you can keep the water away from your home and let it move safely through your lot. One of the worst things you can do is try to protect your property boundary, because when you protect your property boundary, really what you're doing is pushing water and mud on your neighbors, and that's not a good place to be. And also, I want to point out that if you would like to get an expert to come down and help you and take a look at your property to help identify things you can do, the Natural Resource Conservation Service has a phone number you can call, and they can schedule an expert to come out and meet with you and help talk to you about your property. There's also a website that's maintained by EMD, rivcoready.org/stormready. That website will have all of the information we've collected on this burn area. So all the specialist reports that have been prepared, some homeowner's guide to help you further understand what you can do to prepare for this winter, information on the evacuation zones, how to sign up for information to stay informed. That's all located on this website, and I recommend that you put that on your favorites tab so that you can stay connected and follow us this winter. And then lastly, I just want to point out that your standard homeowner's policy does not cover flood insurance. And so if you haven't bought flood insurance separately and specially and you get flooded, your homeowner's policy is not going to cover that flood damage. You can call your insurance agent and you can ask for flood insurance and they can get it for you. If for some reason your insurance agent doesn't provide flood insurance, there's a website and phone number on here. If you go to either the website or you make a call to that phone number, the Federal Emergency Management Agency will help you find an insurance agent where you can buy flood insurance. And the key thing to remember here is that flood insurance takes 30 days to activate, so you really need to think about whether you need it now. If you wait till right before the storm, it's too late. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to me, and I'd like to turn it over to Alex Tardy with the Weather Service so that he can talk a little bit about what we're expecting this winter. So thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Jason. A lot of great information. We work very closely with Jason and with the Emergency Management Department. My name is Alex Tardy. I'm a meteorologist with National Weather Service. I'm in charge of the warning program, and we're going to talk about the warning program specifically and the type of messaging that you will hear during the upcoming winter. Hopefully not often, but you need to be familiar with the terms, especially watches, warnings, and the products that we issue from the National Weather Service. So our job is to monitor the weather. Basically 24/7 we're monitoring the weather, 365. And we are able to monitor the weather using various tools, satellite, radar, computer models. The bottom line is we provide information directly to flood control and directly to emergency management to help them decide on evacuation notices. So the information we are feeding to them starts sometimes a week to 10 days before, and then goes all the way up to when it's raining or even after it's rained. I have a short presentation that I'll provide everyone the details on what I'm talking about, and there's really some main takeaway points here that I want you to focus on is watches and warnings and understanding what those are. And then the other thing is understanding the weather and paying attention to the weather way before you learn about an evacuation warning or an order. Our office has a program we call Turn Around, Don't Drown. I want to highlight that because it's an educational safety program. It's to remind everyone, when you see flowing water across a creek, no matter how deep it looks, it's not worth the risk. One of the number one causes, other than heat in the United States, is flood-related fatalities, and most of those are cases where vehicles are trying to cross running water. Either the road is washed out or the water's deeper or moving faster than expected. Jason showed some great videos, so I'm not going to show the video, but I want you to keep in mind with mudslides, debris flows, think of like a beaver dam. Once it starts happening, it can be very unpredictable, very unpredictable. It can come down fast, like Jason described and showed, and can also come down slow, get clogged, buckle up, spill over, and then break loose suddenly. So this can happen while it's raining and even in areas where it's hardly raining at all, downstream. Big fires we've had this year, and Jason showed really clearly that these fires burned hot. And that's important when you see the maps that I show next. But the fires burned hot, they burned hard, and they burned on very steep, rugged terrain in the San Bernardino Mountains and also San Jacinto Mountains. So we work with United States Geological Survey after the U.S. Forest Service has done their assessment. They run modeling on the area. And the areas that you see shaded on the Apple and the El Dorado fire, shaded in the red and the deep red, those are the areas, and those are the canyons, those are the drainages, those are the basins, those are the creeks that are most likely to have mud and debris flow and significance. So they have a very high likelihood of having debris flows and mudslides within those red shaded areas. And Jason went into some detail on the biggest threat in Riverside County. So here's a close-up view of what I was talking about. You can see the canyons, especially the Banning area, where those areas are susceptible. It's not a matter really of if they're going to get a debris flow. Sometimes we have burn scars where we don't know and we're uncertain or there's a low probability. This is a matter of when. It's going to happen either this year or next year, sooner than later. When you look at the snow fire information from the United States Geological Survey, you can see the snow fire doesn't have zero threat, but it has much less of a threat, much less of a threat. The terrain is not as steep, the soil wasn't burned as bad, you're less likely to have a destructive, significant debris flow. But it's not a zero chance. You still will see mud and you still will see some debris coming down. The National Weather Service will collect all the information and we'll put it on one page like here, where the right officials can monitor it in real time and share the information, all the way to when the debris flow already happens to days before it even rains. So for you, what I want you to remember is the watch and the warning. So several days before any winter storm comes, we'll send out messages that something significant's coming. It looks like we might get this amount of rain and this amount of rainfall rate. Rainfall rate is the key, like Jason talked about. It's so important. You'll have rain events that are light and they're 24 hours and they'll do very little. And then all of a sudden you'll have a period of rain with a storm moving through, even in the middle of winter, and it might only rain for an hour or two hard, and that's when it could let loose. That's when the mud and debris would likely be coming down. So beyond the outlook of, okay, it's going to rain in 5 to 6 days, it's important to tune into the weather every day when you hear that and follow it all the way up to when it rains. If we get into the mode of the watch, the flood watch, that's the mode where you need to not only be ready, but you need to even be ready to go or even go. So once you get to the watch mode within 1 to 2 days, that is high confidence that heavy rain is coming. Heavy rain, not just heavy rain, but heavy rain that could cause a debris flow or mudslide on the burn scar. So the watch is really critical. That's the time where you can act. Way before that, you need the plan. The watch is where you can actually start acting and putting that plan into action. The warning mode, that is the mode where your smartphone will go off. That is the mode where the emergency alert system on your TV, radio, will start scrolling across. That mode is absolutely critical that you've already taken action. If you wait until then and take action, you might find a lot of problems on the roadways. In addition to congestion, you may see washouts, you may see debris flows occurring at the time. It could be very dangerous. So the warning mode is the last message that something is coming, it rained too hard. You may only have about an hour of notice. So it's really important to understand the difference between the watch, because the watch gives you significant time to actually do something. Today, now is the time to take care of your yard and the drainages. The watch is, okay, heavy rain's coming. The warning is, it is here, and it's imminent, and it's likely flooding. So very important. I also want to know, looking at these areas in the San Bernardino Mountains and the foothills, these areas are notorious, as Jason gave a couple examples of flash flooding, debris flows, rock slides, even when there is not a burn scar. This particular event was in 2014. Massive rocks, boulders, floodwaters, everything came down the mountain. Basically about an inch of rain in an hour for 2 hours. So 2 inches of rain doesn't sound like a big number, right? 2 inches of rain, but it's a matter of how long it occurred, the duration, only in 2 hours. This is a situation here where I talk about turn around, don't drown. It's going to look like it's passable. It's going to look like it's not that bad, but it becomes very unpredictable at this point. The road might be washing out underneath. The culvert might be washing out. There may be many things going on that are not obvious at all, especially when visibility is poor or if it's raining at the time. It becomes very dangerous. Here's an example of another event up at Oak Glen where just too much rain fell on a non-burn scar. And the reason why I'm showing that is because the magnitude with the burn scar is often 2 to 3 times as much water, 2 to 3 times as much debris, mud, ash, and everything coming down. Here's the Holy Fire in Riverside County, and Jason briefly touched on this, and this is very likely the type of scenario you'll see. It'll vary in depth, it'll vary in size, it'll vary in the amount of logs and rocks and small ones, medium ones, mud and ash that come down. The Valley Fire up in the same general area was a very small fire in 2018. It was only a few hundred acre fire. Jason explained these two fires are 50,000 acres when you combine the two. The Valley Fire let loose and brought 10 to 12 feet of mud, debris, rocks, closing Highway 38. Luckily, no one was in its path directly. It would have been devastating. It was about 3/4 of an inch of rain in about an hour, and then the storm moved on. The fire was actually still burning at the time. This is what a warning will look like. So when you get the warning message, this means it's happening, it's imminent. It's not the time to go to Facebook or to go onto social media and figure out, is this real, is this not real? It'll be flashing on your cell phone. Flash flood warning through the wireless emergency alert system. And the warning message will be specific to the actual burn scar. And it may even give some information to go to Rivco Ready. It may give information about certain creeks that are more likely to have problems than others, certain drainages and road closures. One challenge we'll have, and my office out of San Diego covers San Bernardino and all of Riverside. So one challenge we will have is with communication, because the county line literally is sitting right on the fire. So our office in particular will be focused on communicating with San Bernardino and also with Riverside, and sometimes at the same time. This is what part of the Dorado fire looks like. Huge mountain range. Yucaipa Ridge, completely moonscaped, completely burned down to the soil and beyond. The experts went up there and looked around, took sampling, took photography, and it is a burn area that about 50% of it is severely burned, with a high probability of debris flows and flooding. It's a very dangerous situation in this area. Now, towards the end here, I want to make sure, because some of you may not know what I'm talking about, a flash flood warning for debris flow, how would it appear on your phone? This is how it would appear on your phone. You don't have to subscribe to it. You don't subscribe to it. The phone comes ready, right out of the box. And once we send the message out, it's very much like an Amber Alert that you may be familiar with. You may be familiar with an Amber Alert. The flash flood warning is the same. And we triangulate it using the cell phone towers. So the actual wireless emergency alert on your cell phone should not be going to like Palm Springs or Victorville. It should be just going to that area if that's the area we're concerned about. Our message looks like this, a lot of text, but this is what you would see on our weather.gov webpage. This is what you'll see scrolling across your TV on the emergency alert system. Remember, the emergency alert system is completely different than the wireless emergency alert system. Completely different. But the message on the wireless emergency alert system will be short and brief. The message on the emergency alert system on your TV screen or your radio will be a little longer and look like this. And it should specifically call out the fire. It should say Apple Fire. It likely will even say like the Banning Canyon. It might even say some of the roads on the area, depending on the exact location of the heavy rain. So a quick outlook here, because I know you're wondering, so what are we going to expect this winter type of thing? Right now we have a La Nina going on in the Pacific Ocean, in the equator area, way south of Hawaii. Why do we talk about that? I'll briefly explain why. Elsewhere in the Pacific, massive warm water, a reflection of our overall weather pattern, a reflection of many things, including excessive heat in California. La Nina is a weather pattern typically associated with the cold phase along the equatorial Pacific Ocean, way down near the equator. What La Nina does is it tends to bring us a shorter winter, a drier winter, but a variable winter. And what that means is you can go stretches in the winter where there's no rain for a couple weeks, middle of January, and then all of a sudden, early February, you get walloped with heavy rain from a big winter storm. So the challenges with La Nina are the variability, the long durations of no rain, and all of a sudden it rains too much. So it's almost all or nothing when it comes to La Nina. So the official outlook coming up for the winter, and then I'll have some takeaway message at the end of the summary slide, is drier conditions. But for you on the burn scar, what you need to know is that the return interval or the frequency of a rainfall that would cause problems on either one of the burn scars or the snow fire, on all three of those, the return interval is every year. So on average, every year, there's at least one or two events on average. So even this year with La Nina, you'll be hearing about, okay, it might be a little drier, it might be a warmer winter, but your message and your understanding needs to be that it is common and is expected to have at least a couple storms this winter that'll really test us or exceed limits and cause mudslides and debris flows, even in this type of winter with La Nina. Here's the summary slides. I'll let you take a look at them. The bottom line is we've had an incredibly warm summer. We are not through the fire season by any means. So we might be talking about additional fires come a month or so now, additional burn scars, hopefully not. But with our current burn scars, with the El Dorado and the Apple, what we do know is high burn intensity, high potential for debris flows and mudslides in there. And on average, every year, we receive 1 to 2 storms that will likely exceed the rainfall rate thresholds on this burn scar. And that means you'll get many storms still that are smaller and less, but at least a couple that will exceed it on an average year, even this coming year. So keep that in mind and make sure you understand the difference between a watch, that's your long lead time, and the warning message. Because the warning message will likely be something that flashes on your phone, and you should have probably already acted or sheltered in place or taken action before that message. But it's the last reminder that something bad's happening because too much rain occurred. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for Riverside for having us here from the National Weather Service.
Good evening. My name is Todd Hopkins. I'm Division Chief with CAL FIRE, Riverside County Fire. I'm the Division Chief that oversees the Cherry Valley, Beaumont, Banning area, and Oak Glen. What I want you to know is we were there for the Apple Fire and we were there for the El Dorado Fire, and we're now preparing that our resources, we will be there if there is any type of flooding. We will be ready for those responses. We are going to be putting sandbags in different fire station locations, also sand with those locations. You can go to any Riverside County fire station and ask for sandbags. We will determine where we're going to end up having sand delivered to, and we will post that in our social media. Please don't wait until it's raining. It's too late if you are trying to do sandbags when the rain's already started. You should start preparing your homes for that right now. We need you to be, and that's part of being prepared. You're going to hear later in the presentations about the Ready, Set, Go. And you're going to hear about evacuation warnings, shelter in place, and evacuation orders. Please, when the slide appears later on in the presentation, please understand what the definitions of each one of those type of evacuations meanings are. So the difference that we're going to have here, although we'll be ready to respond, is we have modules of swiftwater rescue teams. Unfortunately, what we're going to be dealing with, as you've heard, is we're going to be having mud and debris flows, and there's a difference in the way we have to respond to a swiftwater event versus a mud and debris flow event. Swiftwater events, we can send our personnel into the water to effect rescues while the water is still moving. However, with the mud and debris, because of all the items that are coming down in the water, we essentially have to wait for the mud and debris to stop before we can then go in to effect rescues in most cases. So if you are being impacted at your home and you chose not to evacuate, there's a chance that you might have to wait until we can get in, until the mud stops flowing. Also, areas throughout the county and the city are going to have, as you heard earlier from Alex, are going to have water that's going to come over the top of the roads. Please do not cross with your vehicles. Do not try to walk across. The pavement will be weak in some areas and could give away, or your vehicle will just stop in the middle of it. That puts our rescuers in harm trying to go and get you out of the vehicle. And again, depending on what mud or debris flows are going to be coming down will depend on if we can get to you inside your vehicle. So please don't cross over water that is on the road. Please be prepared. Please, when the evacuation warnings come out, please listen to what those warnings are and evacuate from your home. That is all I have. CAL FIRE will be ready to respond, and we will be prepared. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Lieutenant Alfonso Campa from the Cabazon Sheriff's Station with the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. I'm going to talk tonight about evacuations and road closures. In the Cherry Valley, Beaumont area, we have several areas that we're going to be evacuating in case of the flood. Understand that when we give the warning, that's telling you, get your stuff ready. We're going to have mobile field force teams out there that will be making announcements. We'll be going door to door and letting people know in the zones that are going to be affected. Once we give the warning, be prepared, because when the order comes, we're asking you to get out, because it's imminent danger. Keep in mind, we will not force you out of your home. I know a lot of you during the fires didn't leave, and we understand that. That's why we will have a mobile field force ready in each zone. They'll be providing security. We'll have deputy sheriffs out there actively patrolling, but also understand, once the order is given, if there's an emergency at your house or around you, you may have an extended wait for us to get to you guys. Also, we're looking at road closures in several areas. One of the areas, several of the areas are in the Cherry Valley Boulevard area. We have Vineland and Cherry Valley Boulevard, which not only does Noble Creek cross there, but also Little San Gorgonio crosses those two streets. We also have Noble, where Noble Creek comes down, and there's a couple houses right at the edge of Noble Creek that will have to be evacuated because we fully expect the water to just rush right through your yard. Also looking at International Parkway around Bogart Park. That's an area where the water is going to be coming right out of the burn area through Bogart Park, and that's where the first place it actually crosses a road. We're looking at Bellflower and Brookside area. That, for the residents of Cherry Valley, you guys know that traditionally floods. Bellflower usually becomes a river. You have high curves for that reason. Keep in mind, once that starts flooding, it's too late. So you're going to have to get out beforehand. And that's affected by Marshall Creek. Myself and Lieutenant Galetta, who will be talking in a few minutes, actually drove into Marshall Creek, and it's a complete burn. So we're expecting that whole canyon to just come right down that creek, and that's common for Bellflower. And then moving east, when we get to Myers Canyon, the road itself, for the residents up there, you guys know that the road and the creek are one. That is the creek. You literally drive up the creek. It's a dirt road, but that's where all the water is going to come rushing down. The upper portions of east and west Myers Canyon are completely devastated. It's a moonscape. Once we give the warning, we're going to have deputies going up into this canyon, giving warnings. Please heed these warnings, and when the order comes, be prepared to get out. The main concern for us is that when San Gorgonio River comes down out of Banning Water Canyon, it's going to completely wash out that roadway. It's already washed out last year. Right now, you're literally driving through the wash. There used to be a bridge, now that's gone. And it's going to completely cut off Myers Canyon. And it may be days before we can get in there. We are preparing for that. Last year with the Cranston fire and the Cranston debris flow, we brought in specialized vehicles from the National Guard that will cross over, are specially designed for river crossings. But I honestly believe that the flow coming out of San Gorgonio or the Water Canyon is going to be a little bit too much for even those vehicles. Traditionally, that turns into a river, and now with this burn that completely devastated the upper portions and actually the lower portions of that canyon also, it's going to be an intense flow. And that's going to move on into the Morongo Reservation. I know we weren't really touching much on Morongo, but the Morongo residents, rest assured that the Morongo tribal admin and Floyd Velasquez, they're on top of it. We've been in meetings with the mobile, with their unified command with not only CHP, Beaumont, Banning, CAL FIRE, and EMD, National Weather Service. So we're on top of this. We're going to keep you guys safe, but just please heed our warnings. And that's all I have for.
Good evening. My name is Jared Gibbon. I'm with the Riverside County Transportation Department. I'm here to talk about our increased presence that we will have in the area to ensure drainage courses, county maintained drainage courses are open, clean and clear, and ready for any potential debris flows. Pre-fire, we're going to heed the warnings from our experts and potentially close roads that may experience debris flows. Roads that may have not been closed prior. When you see those road closures, please do not go around them. Turn around, don't drown. You've heard from the experts that just because it looks safe to cross, you do not know what's on the other side. Culverts could be damaged, could be gone. So please, if you see a road closure, turn around and don't drown. Post debris flow, if we do experience any debris flow and the mud and debris has been deposited on a county maintained road, we will do our best to open that road, get the debris off the road in a timely manner. Please bear with us. Do not try to go on the roads with debris. You're only going to be in our way, but we will do our best to open the roads up in a timely manner as soon as possible if we do experience any debris on the roads. The other thing is if you do have, we will be going out door to door for properties that have been identified. If you do have any private property mitigation questions or concerns, you can contact me to do an assessment on your property on a one-on-one, and my information will be on the screen. So if you have any questions regarding private property mitigation, please do not hesitate to reach out. But I cannot tell you enough and stress the importance. Any road closures, turn around, don't drown. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Robert Galetta. I'm a lieutenant with the Beaumont Police Department, and I'd like to start by thanking our community partners here tonight for providing this important presentation to our community. I want to assure our community that the Beaumont Police Department is working in partnership with all of our allied agencies to prepare for the winter storm season and the possibility of flooding and mudslides. We'd like to let our residents know that we'll be hosting community meetings to discuss potential impacts and responses. Please check our websites and social media accounts for information on these future events. Thank you.
Hi again, my name is Shane Reichart, Senior Public Information Specialist for the County of Riverside's Emergency Management Department. It's September is National Preparedness Month, and it's no surprise that we're ending this month and this evening with a preparedness message. We urge everyone to take this message very seriously, to take steps now before things happen to prepare, not just for the potential for mud and debris flow, but for everyday emergencies. We want people to be informed, to take steps. So I'm gonna have a couple slides. There's 4 simple steps that you can take to prepare yourself and your family. First, if you're watching this, you're doing it now. You want to be informed and learn what the hazards are to your neighborhood and your community. Take that time to know what they are and then figure out what you're going to do. So by doing that, you're going to have a plan. Develop your plan that includes everyone in your household, including your pets. Know what you're going to do if there's an evacuation called for, if you have to leave rapidly in the middle of the night, whatever. Have a kit so that you have a bag that you can grab with you, know what you're going to take before you're asked to evacuate. You want to know what that is and alleviate that stress that you might have. You just got a message, it says evacuate, what do I take, what do I do, where do I go? If you can have that plan and have that kit in advance, it's going to do you so much to ease your peace of mind, and it's going to help you be more resilient. Get involved, find ways to help your neighbors out, volunteer, help your community, do whatever you can to make sure that all of us in this together as a community are working towards the common goal of taking care of each other. I want to emphasize evacuation terms again. Chief Hopkins touched on it. The evacuation terms are standardized. You'll see these throughout the entire state. A couple years ago, it was agreed upon that everybody would try and use standardized evacuation terms. Riverside County agencies are all using these terms, and this is what it means. Get ready for flood type things. We're going to try and give you as much notice as possible when we see things on the horizon where it might rise to the level of triggers. So we're talking with the National Weather Service and we're seeing that there's the potential for rainfall that could cause triggers for mud and debris flow. An evacuation warning, it's basically putting everyone on notice. There's something going on, and public safety agencies have determined that it may be unsafe for people. If you need extra assistance or time to evacuate, if you've got large animals, if you are using assistive devices, this may be the best time for you to evacuate and get to safety. Shelter in place, if you hear that, it's been determined that the roads and areas around your property may not be safe for you to be on them and driving. So the best course of action, if you're ordered to shelter in place, is to stay where you are. In a flood type situation, that may mean that you go to higher ground in your property. Don't go in the basement, you want to go to higher ground. An evacuation order is a lawful order, and we want people to leave the area. It's been determined that it's unsafe for you to be there, and as Chief Hopkins mentioned, we are not going to put rescuers in danger unnecessarily. So that evacuation order is allowing you to get to safety and allowing us not to have to send in rescuers into a dangerous area. They take on a lot of danger when they take that job, but we don't want to put them in danger unnecessarily. It's important that you sign up for the local alerts. Now, Alex from National Weather Service talked about some of the alerts that the National Weather Service uses. Alert Rivco is a system that we use in Riverside County. Public safety agencies across Riverside County use Alert Rivco to notify residents when there's something going on in their community that impacts their specific address. Alex mentioned the wireless emergency alerts. Those are signals that are sent to cell towers, and they blanket everybody within range of that cell tower. The Alert Rivco system allows us to target addresses. We draw a box around the area that we're specifically trying to reach, and we send that message out. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that if you've got cell phones, they're not automatically enrolled in programs like this. And the reason for that is because you can go to the local convenience store, you can buy a cell phone, you give them $20 for whatever minutes, it's not associated with an address, there's no way for us to track where that phone resides. So we encourage you to go onto Rivco Ready, it's rivcoready.org/alertrivco, and you can enroll your cellular phones and your voice over internet, because those are also not tied to a specific address. Enroll those in this alerting program. It's going to be something that we use on a regular basis. And there's certain things that we can do with this that we can't do with wireless emergency alerts, such as give the all clear. Wireless emergency alerts are required to be an emergency situation, so we're not allowed to use that to tell people that it's safe to go back home. If you've enrolled in Alert Rivco, we can use that system to alert you and let you know that it's safe to go back home. It's been mentioned, the Storm Ready website. This is a site that we put together during the Cranston and Holy Fires. It's got a wealth of information, and our goal is to continue to put important information that is necessary for homeowners to be able to review what's available, what we know, and to make important decisions. So the flood preparedness guide is there. You can download an electronic version of that, and it's got a lot of great information from big scale, looking at your property, to everything to putting down sandbags and how to properly fill and place sandbags. It's a great resource. That website has a lot of good information, and as we get more information, the bear report, the wart report, we're going to put that information there for your review. Lastly, I want to finish off with a message of going to official sources for news and information. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of local neighbors who do their best to try and put out information, and we understand that there's a sense of community, but they're not always the best source for the most up-to-date information. So Twitter is one of the tools that I recommend highly because it's for communicators like myself. It's one of those tools that we can quickly put information out and let people know that there's something going on that they need to pay attention to. A lot of times it will be a call to action. Go to our website, go follow the fire department. There's something going on. Go get more information so that you can be fully up to speed on what's going on. And then you can take the measures that are necessary to keep you and your family safe. With that, thank you very much. I want you to have a good evening and be safe.